Good afternoon or good morning, depending upon your location where you're joining us from. Welcome and thank you for joining the Canadian Partnership for Women and Children's Health, CanWaCH, for our webinar on navigating a virtual or remote workplace during COVID-19. I'm Charmaine Crockett, the Director of Stakeholder Engagement for CanWaCH, and I'm located in Kemptville, Ontario. We are all experiencing impacts on our teams and operations as we pull together as Canadians to implement measures to slow down the spread of COVID-19. One area where CanWaCH has not been significantly impacted is our day-to-day way of working. As you may already know, CanWaCH is a permanently virtual workplace, and as we saw our members and partners transitioning to having employees work from home, we thought we could share some of the tips, tricks, and best practices we've picked up in our nearly 4-year journey in building a virtual organization. It's interesting to note that while hosting virtual meetings and webinars like this is what we do every day and sometimes several times a day, this is one of the largest video gatherings we've had. Quite a few people have registered for this and hopefully they can all join us. Speaking of video, before we proceed any further, some Zoom guidance that will help us run this webinar smoothly. Please keep yourself on mute during the session unless you're speaking. We've learned that this avoids distracting echoes and background noises during the session. And I think I can hear someone who could put themselves on mute at the moment. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a chat function. Please use this to ask any questions and we will answer them during the question and answer portion of our webinar. You can also flag any technical issues you are experiencing and someone will work to support you. You also have the option to select speaker view or gallery view at the top right of your Zoom window. Gallery view is if you wish to see multiple participants and scroll through, and speaker view obviously is if you just want to see the person who's speaking in addition to the presentation. During our Q&A session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions in the language of your choice, English or French. And now for our agenda for the day. We are pleased to be joined by David Boucher, Senior Policy Advisor at Global Affairs Canada. For members and sector partners on this session, he will provide a brief update on how the department is responding to the outbreak and working with partners in our sector. Today's content about virtual work will be presented by members from across our CanWaCH team. Nicole Jamrozinski will share organizational best practices, Antu Hossain will talk about effective technology and tools, Reid will explore personal considerations when working virtually, and Erin will touch on issues to consider specifically while working during the COVID-19 response period. Following our Q&A session, CanWaCH CEO Helen will wrap up our webinar and provide further details on our next webinar in this series taking place early next week. A few caveats about the information our team will share today. We recognize that CanWaCH is an organization of 22 people that operates as a permanent virtual workplace. We understand that not everything we share will fit with organizations of larger sizes or of different business focus, that the logistics of operating virtually can vary greatly. We also acknowledge that setting up a temporary virtual operation is vastly different than operating as a permanent virtual workplace. We also understand that teleconferencing, video conferencing, and internet providers have currently been experiencing significant challenges in meeting the sudden current demand from Canadians now working virtually. Flexibility, patience, and innovative solutions are required. And finally, we know we have some participants joining us from outside of the global health and international development sectors. Please be patient as you may hear some unfamiliar terminology and acronyms. I am now pleased to welcome David Boucher, who joins us from Global Affairs Canada. Then Nicole will jump right into our CanWaCH presentations. Thank you very much.
Oui, bonjour et merci. I'll do this in French first, and then I'll explain in English. So just have just a technical problem here. OK. Alors, je veux d'abord remercier CanWaCH de me permettre d'assister à ce webinaire et de m'adresser à vous tous et toutes. Je vais vous assurer que Affaires mondiales Canada est en mode écoute avec ses partenaires du milieu du développement international. Je suis là principalement pour récolter vos questions, préoccupations, recommandations. Je n'oserais pas m'exprimer au nom du ministère aujourd'hui et prendre position, mais le mot d'ordre est d'être à l'écoute de nos partenaires et de transmettre toutes ces questions à la haute gestion. Alors, mes collègues font de même depuis quelques jours déjà. Alors, nos équipes de spécialistes sont déjà à pied d'œuvre afin de trouver des solutions innovantes aux défis que nous lance la situation actuelle. Et je vous souhaite la santé et la sécurité pour vous et vos proches. Et je demeure convaincu que le monde du développement international, inventif et résilient, s'il en est un, saura trouver les moyens de traverser ces temps difficiles. So, hi all. First of all, I want to thank CanWaCH for allowing me to attend this webinar and to address all of you. Global Affairs Canada is in listening mode with its partners in the international assistance community. I am here to gather your questions, concerns, and recommendations. My colleagues have been doing the same for a few days now, and we are gathering and forwarding it to senior management. Our teams of specialists are already hard at work finding innovative solutions to the challenge we face in the current situation. Finally, I wish you and your loved ones health and safety, and I remain convinced that the inventive and resilient world of international assistance will find ways to get through these difficult times. So thank you very much, and I wish us all a good webinar.
Thank you so much, David. So my name is Nicole Jamrozinski, and I am a senior program coordinator with CanWaCH. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm located in Mount Bridges, Ontario, which is located on the traditional lands of Attawandaron, Algonquin, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. To provide some context, CanWaCH is an organization with 22 staff members, though we've seen growth from about 10 staff to 20 over the past few years. We're also a relatively new organization, having incorporated in 2015. Since the beginning, we've been established as a virtual workplace, and we continue to grow and adjust our practices as our organization has evolved. Some of the consistent best practices we have noticed in operating as a virtual organization are providing structure within a day. You can go to the next slide. A virtual workplace, to best be effective, needs to integrate hardware, people, and online processes. In a virtual workplace, trust is key, built through transparency and mutual accountability between employees and managers. Even though we are working from home, we've established structures and systems for our work. We highly recommend setting up core business hours for your teams to be available. At CanWaCH, we set the hours of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. as core business hours, where all staff are expected to be available to one another for calls. This also helps accommodate for people who are working in different time zones across Canada. We start our day by logging into our internal communications platform by saying hello, and by the end of the day by saying goodbye and logging off. This helps give our teammates an idea of when we're available. My colleague Antu will further discuss the tool CanWaCH utilizes for our internal communications platform. Not only does it create structure for your team, but you will have confidence your team will be available for your questions that might arise. Think of it as knocking on your colleague's door to get a quick answer like you're in the office. Working with core business hours is also a way to set clear expectations and to help keep each other accountable. Now on to our next slide. Another area that we focus on is we ensure to meet regularly and connect in as possible, because communication is key. And in virtual workplaces, proactive communication is all the more important. At CanWaCH, the majority of internal communication is done via our online office platform, of which there are many options to choose from. Email is mainly reserved for communicating with external colleagues and stakeholders. Depending on the size of your organization, all staff meetings may be very challenging to hold. If all staff meetings are not possible, encourage your organization to host smaller meetings for teams like leadership, team meetings, and if needed, project-specific meetings. From there, set up a work plan with clear tasks and goals and communicate with your team so you have an understanding of what's expected. We strongly encourage utilizing video tools like this with colleagues and stakeholders. It helps us feel connected and allows us to see cues within the meeting. As these are new tools for many, out of respect, we suggest muting your device when not speaking, provide audio cues like moving to the next document or slide, be present during these discussions, so avoid multitasking during the call, which I know many of us do, pass the mic or ask if there is anything else that needs to be added so you can offer the floor to others. Treat it like you're in an in-person meeting. You don't need to turn off your camera, but mention you need to step away to go to the bathroom, for example. As working from home will be new to many, At CanWaCH, we often start our call with a brief personal update or ask people how they are landing at their desk. People can skip, but it helps create a sense of community and an opportunity for people to connect. Now I'd like to talk about a culture centered around people and setting up professional boundaries. Creating a sense of inclusion and social connectedness will be important during this shift of work life. Strong manager-employee communications is essential. Encourage teams to connect in at the start of the day, discuss what they want to accomplish, and provide space for a personal check-in. Set up clear staff expectations and guidelines and share them with your teams. We know that right now, many organizations are managing this as a one-off or an exceptional circumstance. Likewise, I'm sure many of us are thinking about business continuity plans or office closure plans so that we're prepared if something similar were to happen again. Not everyone will adjust in the same way to a virtual workplace. Be understanding and have open communication with your team frequently. This is new to many and can be challenging. It can be a challenging change. Having these conversations and approaching them in a place of trust and openness and being willing to adjust where needed will give staff and managers confidence in their team and work. We are working on resources to help provide further guidance, which we will share following the webinar. These will include technologies and tools and other resources we might have. I also like to strongly encourage you, if you found resources that you'd like to share, to please feel free to include them in the chat windows. We'll be happy to include these within that document as well. I would now like to hand it over to my colleague Antu, who will be diving deeper into technology and tools.
Thank you, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Antu Hossain, and I am working on the metrics team as the Global Health Impact Officer. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am lucky to call Toronto my home, located on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, I'm really happy to be speaking to you about navigating collaborative digital tools and some of their features, which have been helpful, particularly for us at CanWaCH. To note, as my colleague Nicole has also mentioned, technology is also not an equal playing field. Accessibility varies depending on staff, where they're located. People have different learning styles. You're also maybe being compelled to shift to technology in a time when you didn't have to. So with that comes a learning curve. And so being patient and also knowing that we can't be fearful of technology at this point, it's our best friend. So next slide, please. So one of the things is how stress-inducing technology can truly be. Do I have all backup ready, all options of ways to communicate with others ready? Often the ways to try to mitigate that is just making sure that you are coordinating in advance and communicating with colleagues and partners about alternative ways to reach you and access you. Let's say my video conference here shuts down. Do my colleagues have a way to reach me on WhatsApp, on Skype? All the methods that you are comfortable with, having that prepared in advance and sharing those details are really helpful. As an example, in our sector, and David may be able to speak to that, working among civil society and Global Affairs Canada, project officers at Global Affairs are communicating with their project partners by responding to creative contact methods. So also moving into Skype and WhatsApp as backups. And while also noting that official exchanges are, of course, remain on email and phone calls. So with respect to some of the features that we really appreciate, when it comes to access, we find that right now, how to sift between accessing important documents versus accessing your colleagues is something you're possibly navigating. And with that, we find that we can see that people are needing platforms in which they can streamline internal communications. So as my colleague Nicole mentioned, one of the platforms we use and as our preference is Glip or Ring Central. And this is an example to many other platforms that exist as well. So this allows us to streamline internal communications in such a way that I can chat with Nicole bilaterally, I can chat with my teammates in different dynamics, or also I can chat with teams based on projects and activities. So I can know exactly as much as I need to know, as well as little. So it is called Glip, G-L-I-P, or also known as Ring Central. And we will share a lot of the things we're touching on today in a resource following. So with that, there's also the element of access to documents and storing and sharing files, which many of you may not be used to, but particularly there are questions, of course, around how to access confidential documents and who needs to access those versus for the entire teams. So our preference has been Google Storage and Google Drive. It allows for different access to certain documents or certain folders. And this is also to note the data privacy implications to consider when you are thinking about storage options, noting where your servers are located and the privacy jurisdictions and privacy data laws that are overseeing your server depending on where you're located in the world. So that can vary as well. And now I'll move on to collaboration. So some features that we have also found really particularly helpful in collaborating better together and being faster, but also kind of making sure we're keeping that online camaraderie is shared project working. So with that, we find that people have different working styles, but sometimes we all want to come together on a document, come together on the slides here that you see today, which were all co-created by us, but we're done in real time. So finding ways to collaborate and cross-communicate through documents, Excel sheets, or slides in this case, can be very, very helpful and reduce time that you'll spend on your emails, sending multiple drafts back and forth. And for us, our preference here is Google Documents, Google Sheets, and Google Presentations, but there are multiple examples out there as well. Video matters. I cannot emphasize that enough. We love seeing each other's smiling faces, but it still keeps that connection alive that, you know, it's not always audio, even though voices are also equally okay. Sometimes not everybody has a video feature. So for us, that's important for deciding our platform. So with that, we have Zoom, and that's what we're all on today. It's working well, which is great, but it allows us certain features such as sharing our screen, making sure that others are able to follow along right now, or also downloading the chat box later on, and all the information of everybody who's talked will allow us to make better and more rigorous notes for you all. So these are ways to support documentation, both via video and notes, and I just simply encourage you to know that a lot of these features can be of different priority for you. So when reflecting on ways to navigate digital tools, identify what is needed for your organization and your must-have priorities. Next slide, please. Thank you. So some of the lessons learned, some ways where we've feel like we've succeeded, but of course there's always some things to keep learning. With us, limited internet connectivity. We're grateful, of course, to be in a place that offers ongoing internet connection, and that may not be the case for global partners, for instance. So making sure to be accessible with respect to internet connectivity and the options you provide for people to log on. So whether that means offering a dial-in option for those who have access to a phone only. For instance, I'm always afraid that my Wi-Fi is going to get cut out, so I need my phone just in case I need my hotspot to save me. Again, that is a capacity, and if you do have access to that. In addition to kind of facilitate the scare that we sometimes have around online tools and the newness of it, if you can, as part of your organization, provide some guidance documents to those who you are expecting to use your online tools. So provide a guidance document on how to use Zoom. Some screenshots go a really long way, and sending that along just helps people have a reference. And of course, bearing in mind translation and language and context when considering who you are targeting for these guidance documents. And this also brings us to the quick digital tools of how to show with video. So making sure if you have an online tool and you want to get that across, showing a simple how you are navigating your screen, and then taking a video of that and sending it along to your partners could also be helpful to navigate digital tools that they may not be familiar with. And lastly, simple as it is, but keeping all documentation as accessible as possible to others, understanding that we don't want to send big file sizes and limiting that through zip folders if you can. And I would just leave it at the point of technology doesn't have to be scary, but we can all keep learning and growing with one another and hopefully embrace it. So with that, I will send it over to Caitlin.
Thank you, Antu. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be talking to everyone today. My name is Caitlin Reid, and I'm the Senior Communications Officer at CanWaCH. I'm in Toronto, which is located on the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Wendat, and most recently the Mississaugas people of the Credit. Today, I'm going to be covering the more personal side of working from home. I've worked for CanWaCH for almost 3 years now, and if I'm being honest, it took me several months to fully adjust to working from home. However, I know that a lot of you've just been thrusted into this position quite quickly, and so we're hoping that this can help you adjust, learning from what we've gone through before. So I'll be covering working from a home environment, giving people grace, including yourself, and connecting virtually in a meaningful way. So a home environment is very different from an office environment. And that photo is of a colleague's actual cat. It's not something I grabbed from Google. She loves to brush up right in front of the camera and check out who's on the screen. So we all feel like we know this cat very well. But this is just a realistic part of working from home. There's a lot of distractions that aren't found in an office. Pets, roommates, noisy neighbors, fire alarm tests, we've been through it all. They all happen, and this is on top of the daily distraction of this huge global health pandemic that we're all dealing with right now. So this is really important that we're all dealing with these together. And what we found that helps is creating a separate space. And you need to create that space physically, virtually, and personally. So physically, it's about having a proper workspace. I live in a very small apartment downtown Toronto, so I don't have the space for a separate office, but I do have a specific table and space in my apartment that's just for my work, and that's really helped me separate physically. Virtually, what we're talking about is especially for people that use personal computers for their work, and that's what I do. You need to create that space virtually. So for example, using a different browser for work from what you use personally, or maybe a different login for Chrome, for example. You can log in, and so maybe if you have a personal Gmail login or a professional login, you can separate it that way. And another point is, of course, notifications. So the last thing that we want is a ton of Facebook notifications going off during a webinar or an important call. For example, a colleague of mine, she forgot to turn off her notifications, and her partner texted her, and she had it set up, her texts were going to her computer. And so the text about thawing pork chops was viewable throughout the entire webinar. So just things that we've learned, you know, some people with Macs, I know with Apple products, you get notifications across different, you know, devices. And so it's just something to be aware of. And then the last point is personal space. So it's important for your own personal care and your mental health. There's not a natural separation like there is going to an office and then leaving an office. And so especially at the end of the day, when you sign off, it can be really tempting. We've all been tempted before to just keep working, you know, oh, I'll just answer that. I can easily pop on and answer. But you want to try to avoid this. When you sign off, you're off, the same as when you leave your office. Now, of course, sometimes we have to work overtime. That's a reality for most of us. But again, it's important to continue to set boundaries. If you're going to work overtime, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to work overtime 7 to 9, and that's it. And so you still sign off. You sign back and saying, I'm working on something very specific for this amount of time, and then you sign off again. You do not want to make the mistake of just being on and off throughout the entire evening. It's not good for your own personal care and mental health. And so that brings me to the second part, which is giving people grace. So as in an office environment, productivity and motivation will always ebb and flow. But people can tend to be hard on themselves when they're in a home environment and their motivation is low. It can create sort of almost an awkward feeling, but you need to be easy on yourself. You know, you're at your workspace, you're dealing with all these different distractions, as I've mentioned, you're dealing with a global health pandemic, you're working from home. It's natural that motivation will go up and down. And actually, evidence has shown that remote workers are more productive. However, at the same time, they deal with different issues. So one of those issues is just sitting down at a desk for 8 hours straight, working nonstop. In an office, we have some natural breaks. This is, you know, grabbing a coffee, running into someone in the hall, stopping by somebody's office. We don't have those natural breaks. So we find it useful to actually schedule these in. So we live by our Google calendars. We're always looking at each other's calendars. We have it all shared across the organization. We can see when somebody's busy, whether it's personal or professional, and we respect that. And so, it's important to schedule in breaks as well as regular meetings. So going for a walk over lunch, scheduling a quick tea break or a screen break, maybe you're going to go stretch for 5-10 minutes. These are really important. It helps productivity, but also this part of personal care. And another thing to note is sort of at-home troubleshooting. So in an office, you might have an IT department or someone to help you out when you have some of these internet or different technological issues. But at home, you have to troubleshoot it yourself. So again, we're all dealing with a lot of distractions, and it's good to keep these in mind. But also, this is the reality for your colleagues as well, your managers, your direct reports. And so we all need to give each other grace, and that's sort of what we mean by this section. So, give each other grace, trust and respect each other, that you're working hard, even though you're working from home. As my colleagues have already talked about the importance of cross-team communication, you're sharing deadlines and tasks and you're having check-ins, but you're also trusting each other. If this person has a personal appointment or something they need to deal with, that they're still committed to the work, the same as always, and that they're going to get it done on time. So we found it really important to just start from a position of trusting each other in that way. And then that leads me to the last point, which is meaningful connection in a virtual environment. So feeling connected virtually is a lot harder than feeling connected in person. And this is combined with the social distancing that we're practicing now in all aspects of our life. So a lot of our aspects of our life are now virtual, have to deal with isolation. It can be difficult. So we talked about scheduling breaks and how that's important, maybe going for a walk at lunchtime, but we also need to be intentional about connecting on a personal level. So, we'll be giving updates, professional ones, but we give personal updates as well. We're very meaningful and intentional in that way. So sharing things, good or bad, maybe the bad is just one-on-one message, not with everyone, but sharing those personal updates, making those connections. As you may have noticed from our slides, we are big fans of gifts and memes. We love to share those things. And still having fun at work, sharing those personal updates, making jokes is really important. And, we check in the morning, we go on lunch, we sign off at night. All of these are really important. And at the end of the day, we feel like we see each other in person all the time, even though we don't. We can be really surprised when we've gone months without seeing each other in person, because we are a big part of each other's lives. We're working very collaboratively, and we're being very intentional about connecting with each other. These are some of the tips on the personal side, and now I'll hand it over to my colleague Erin to take us to the next section.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you everybody for sharing. My name is Erin, and I am the Gender Equality Officer here at CanWaCH. My preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'm located in Port Hope, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Mississauga Nations. So I'm going to cover kind of putting into context what my colleagues previously has done. So taking a look at organizational best practices, taking a look at tools and technology, and kind of personal considerations from the lens of working virtually during the COVID-19 health pandemic. So we recognize that COVID-19 is compelling many organizations and workers to consider work from home options, but may not have organizational foundational processes in place to make this a super easy transition. So work from home is not an easy option for everyone, and also not all employees in an organization have the same work from home liberties or job roles that allow for this easy or simple transition. As we've mentioned before, CanWaCH operates as a permanent virtual workspace. But as this is not the case for most, I'm going to touch on how to make this transition while also navigating less than ideal work from home realities. So first, I'm going to start with organizational best practices. So first and foremost, CanWaCH is a small organization. So some of our tips regarding organizational best practices are what work best for us, but might not work for others. In particular, some of our established structures and systems have come from years of trial and error and are also dependent on our organization size. The important takeaway message from kind of this section is to operate with open communication, be flexible, and be prepared to adapt if things are not working. These three things are all key to helping you navigate this transition. For example, CanWaCH's core business hours are from 10 to 3, which is only 5 hours of our 7.5-hour workday.
During these hours, it is expected that everyone be online, but there is added flexibility that allows for us to build our workday around what we might have going on in our personal lives. So that could be doctor's appointments, waiting at the bus stop, running an elderly grandparent or parent on an errand, anything like that. But during this time, the more flexibility that we allow people, the better, as people's needs and responsibilities in other areas of their lives are also taking up more space during the workday than they would normally. We also want to note that finally, not all problems need to be solved at once. If you're able to prioritize your workload and or your organizational needs and put certain projects on hold, this might also aid in the transition and help it be a little bit smoother. So next on to tools and technology. All technology has benefits and takeaways for each individual and organization. So be prepared to take it slow and make adaptations when figuring out what the best tools are for you. Please recognize that some people have less than ideal work from home situations. For instance, sometimes depending on where you live, you might not have the best internet connectivity or bandwidth options that allow you to, say, join a video call. So you'll have to troubleshoot your ways around things like this by either, like Antu mentioned, creating a hotspot or, remote connecting in with a cord, pretty old school way. But yeah, finally, there are a lot of options for working collaboratively in a digital space. It might be a lot different than walking down the hallway to get your coworkers' input on something, but it can be just as effective to get the job done. And finally, some personal considerations. I'm sure we all remember the hilarious viral video of this gentleman doing an interview with a news anchor when his two young children burst in the door to interrupt and basically make him internet famous. So some of the personal considerations to take into account when working from home during COVID-19 is childcare. In particular, how home environments are also in flux with the school and daycare being shut down, which can make working from home a huge challenge. We suggest just being cognizant that your coworkers are juggling multiple competing priorities and added stress at this time, and to also be gentle with yourself. Separating the personal from the work is not going to be as easy as before, and there will likely be additional added stress of caring for family, as well as your own unease at the situation, which can take a toll on people's mental health. What we do is we set some boundaries. Especially in this digital age, it's very easy to have access to an abundance of information as well as to overshare, which can just add to people's stress levels. One thing that I do personally before connecting with a colleague, I will ask them how they're doing today and if they have the mental capacity or the mental bandwidth for me to kind of talk about my problems or talk about COVID-19 or something. So you kind of are limiting how much you're sharing with someone and also protecting their own mental stress in an uncertain and uneasy situation. So in the end, a little flexibility, understanding, and kindness goes a very long way. So thank you. I just want to say thank you to all my colleagues for sharing. And for those of you joining the webinar, I hope that this was informative and useful for everyone. We are now going to be moving into the question and answer portion of our webinar for the next 20-ish minutes. And I just want to remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded and will continue to be recorded so that it is accessible for everyone after the webinar. We will also be sharing a translation of some of the questions that have been asked, as well as if there's anything that comes up at any time, you are more than welcome to reach out to us here at CanWaCH and we will do our best to assist you. So yeah, I can see people have been adding questions to our chat, so feel free to continue to do so at any time. Aussi, vous pouvez demander une question dans la langue de votre choix. So I just want to highlight that if you feel more comfortable asking your question in French, that is more than acceptable. I also want to just say quickly that due to limitations in time, we may not get to all the questions, but they will be reviewed and shared at a later date in both languages. So thank you to everybody. I'm going to just start right from the beginning. The first question that was asked was, will a list of different digital tools used to set up your virtual workspace be shared in a document after the session? And I'm just going to say yes. We're going to share following the webinar a list of resources for all attendees, as well as the recording of this session so that everyone can look back and have access to anything that we've talked about. So our second question is regarding privacy. So in British Columbia, we have provincial government restrictions on databases hosted in the USA, such as Google Docs or Dropbox. Does anyone have any recommended solutions? And also, kind of to add on to that question, has anyone assessed Google versus Dropbox for document management? Is Google Suite secure? So to answer the first part of that question, it's an excellent question. So we primarily operate out of Ontario. So we know that there's different legislation across the country that impacts our organizations in different ways. So we know that there are particular documents and information that need to be restricted and cannot be housed on our online servers. So in terms of the specific British Columbia question, it would definitely just depend on you doing a little bit of research into what is allowed there. And then with regards to Dropbox versus Google, thank you to a participant named Colin for sharing. His personal preference is Dropbox, but he has not seen a privacy review or comparison of the alternatives. And a suggestion from CanWaCH is that we have found Google preferable to Dropbox for file sharing and real-time editing. We found that it is far more flexible and user-friendly, and we found Google Suite very secure, as you can enable a two-step authentication. Next question. How do you manage bilingualism while using communication platforms such as Zoom? Do you use the interpretation features? So we offer options during our Zoom communications to ask questions in French and communicate in French when possible. But we also have made available like translated guidance documents that we've created for operating on these platforms, and we can make them available for you if you would like. We will share guides that we've created in French to use Zoom, as well as our Ring Central and GLIP platform. And if you require simultaneous translation for a meeting, there are translation services that will deliver virtually. So for example, Interprify or InterpretNet are two services that will do that. And then, do any of your staff have young children, school children at home? And if yes, how has that changed your ability to work from home? Basically, we have a few staff with young children home at the moment as they are on March break. And we are also kind of in flux and in this grace period of figuring out arrangements for them upon return to work next week. And especially in the context of organizations responding to COVID, I think that this topic is quite front of mind. And that is why we've really kind of dived into highlighting maintaining realistic expectations about your workday and core working hours and productivity, because it's an emerging issue and we're kind of all just taking it day by day and figuring out what works best for us as individuals and as parents, as well as what works best for the organization. Okay, next question. What is the advantage of Zoom compared to Skype? Can you share documents on Zoom like we can do on Skype now? Is there a user number limit with Zoom? So there is a free option to utilize Zoom, and that comes with a 40-minute limit on a call. So CanWaCH uses a Zoom line that we pay for, which has an unlimited time and up to 100 participants able to join a call at once. So today we've upped that capacity so that we were able to host everyone here. And there are various subscription levels available on Zoom, up to 100, up to 200, etc. Zoom also allows screen sharing as well. So it's easy to share the link with all participants so they don't need an ID, and it's accessible to others who do not have Zoom. Okay, and finally, a French webinar on the topic could be a thing to consider. Yes, we agree. Thank you so much for the suggestion, and we will consider it if there is a demand for it. So I think I still see some questions rolling in. So thank you again for everybody for sharing. I believe that people are probably have a lot to say on these particular topics, and definitely encourage if there's anything that we have spoken about today from the four of us in our presentations that need clarification or that you want some further information on, to reach out and we can definitely clear any of that up. So, has anyone used Slack for team conversations? So at CanWaCH, we've highlighted the particular features of the service that we have gone with. So at CanWaCH that we use GLIP, but we do fully acknowledge that there are a ton of other platforms that are available for you to use while kind of managing work from home. In particular, we really like using GLIP because it is like using Facebook for work. There's a lot of really amazing tools that are available to us through video chats, just chat boxes and chat conversations in general. It's very, very easy in terms of project management. You're able to set up a particular team for your project and then add members on that team so that your conversation is all kind of centralized in one location. Things aren't getting lost like they might if you were sending out multiple emails with people CC'd. And it's also wonderful because we can do this thing that we call tasking, where you can set a task for yourself or for a colleague, set a timeline, use like upload documents associated with that task to it, include information and links. So it's very, very useful for us, but we definitely encourage doing a little bit of research to find out what works best for you. Take a look at what you might need to prioritize in your own work life, working from home now. And yeah, that's just the one that we found works best for us. And yes. So I'm going to open up the floor now. We have a few minutes if anybody would like to ask some questions versus typing them to us, or have any comments, or I also see people have been really excellent at sharing some resources. So that could be something else if you wanted to share about a particular resource that you use at your organization that you think might be helpful for others out there. I open the floor up to you.
Oh, it's Jenny here. I may have missed, and there may not be an easy answer, but I'm sure that the experience this past week of having small school children at home has been as challenging for CanWaCH, who have used to been working in a quiet home environment. How's it going with children, and what are the lessons learned?
So maybe I'm Melody from CanWaCH, and I do, so as Erin said, actually the majority of colleagues with small children are on March break at the moment, and me, I personally am fortunate to have had my partner take care of the kids this week and for the next 2 weeks. So that's why, unfortunately, I cannot share practical advice at the moment and tips that I've used, but I am thinking about it, because if this goes longer than the next 3 weeks that most of us were informed that the schools will be closed for the next 3 weeks, I will need to be creative and figure out with my colleagues some solutions. So I'm sorry, at the moment I have nothing to share much.
Maybe others have some suggestions that on this call, if you happen to be encountering that. I know it's a big group to unmute yourself, but feel free to just interject and step in.
Well, I'm happy to share my experience because our team, the Spirit Change team, is actually a remote team. So we have staff working from different locations in Canada, mostly in Alberta and in Quebec. And I am a mother. I have a young child, and I'm dealing with the situation right now. So if at the beginning, my partner and I were alternating, like I will be working in the morning, you will be working during the afternoon. Right now with the team, what we're trying to do is to allow flexible hours knowing that parents might work very early in the morning, they might be working late at night, might be working during nap time. So this means that we need to be very flexible. When the baby is sleeping, then we have our meetings, but then if he wakes up, then we all stop. So this is how we are dealing with this right now after only 4 days.
Thank you for sharing, Andrea. And I think this just goes back and kind of goes hand in hand with what we've really been trying to say with our presentation, is that the flexibility and the adaptability of your team and your colleagues and also your family when just trying to work in times of uncertainty and in times where you have little distractions maybe running around you at home that you might not have had before. It's just going to take a little bit of troubleshooting to figure out what works best for your family. But I've heard just from other colleagues and other friends that are working right now with little ones at home that having another partner at home who's able to offset some of that childcare need has been helpful, but their work days are very long as they work between naps and snack times and times of chaos. So thank you again for sharing. Did anybody else have anything they would like to add to the conversation or to share a tool or a resource?
Hi, Jen here from AMREF Health Africa in Canada. I would say, just going back to somebody had asked about single parents. We are gone fully virtual this week, obviously, but I think one thing we're trying to do as colleagues is for colleagues that have young children, just be accepting if the child comes into the video shot or wants their parents' attention or something. So just cutting parents some slack and not worrying if there's interruptions in internal meetings, and sort of inviting the kids into the conversation if that's necessary. We found that helpful.
Thanks. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, that is it. Just if you see a little one running by, it might be a little bit out of the norm, but we're all working in a little bit of chaotic times, that's for sure. We've just had another question come in that's a little bit more about the logistics of working as a virtual organization. So the question is, what do you do about phone calls coming in from outside organizations? So we are, as we've mentioned before, we're set up virtually. So internally, we use the GLIP platform to communicate with colleagues internally. But when we're going to be talking externally to colleagues, we've all given out our personal phone numbers. So they're in our email signatures. We share them with people who might want to get in touch with us, who exist outside of our own organization. We also use our Zoom line to set up conference calls with external partners and external stakeholders because we do really enjoy using the video feature and allowing people to be able to connect with us that way. We've never really found that it's been an issue with sharing personal phone numbers. We set it up with the expectations that, CanWaCH works. These are our business hours, like don't call outside of our business hours. People know where we're located in the country. So for example, I would not call, a colleague on the West Coast at 9 a.m. my time because it would be way too early on their end. But it's kind of something that we've established as an expectation as staff come aboard, that this is how it's set up. But yeah, we do, as much as possible, try to utilize Zoom as a platform and do video calls. And then I see another question about how often do you actually get together physically? If most of you are in the region, in the Toronto region, do you have a way or space to meet at some regular intervals? So generally speaking, we have a full staff in-person meeting several times a year. And we also have meetings with external partners at different points. A lot of times we're going to meetings in Ottawa. So depending on your team, you'll be meeting with various members of CanWaCH, the CanWaCH team, as you go to meetings at Global Affairs Canada or in-person training opportunities that arise. But we do try to bring our staff together as much as possible, a couple times a year, to really kind of bring everyone together and create that really great sense of community and a working relationship. So I'm sorry, I'm going to just take one last question that's come in. And before turning it over to Helen Scott, our CEO, to wrap up. So the last question is do we have an organizational main phone number? So we do not at this point. As we've said before, we are trying, we give out our personal phone numbers, or we try to utilize the Zoom option to organize phone calls. But we see in the comments that there are other services that organizations use to triage phone calls, such as voicemail, as well as voice to email options. And it's great to know that that is out there and that that works for some people. And as we've stated before, sometimes things that work best for us might not work for you. So appreciate all your little tips and tricks and kind of letting us into your world a little bit and what has been working well for you as you transfer to this online digital space. So I just want to say thank you all again for participating and sharing your thoughtful and also thought-provoking questions. We hope that what we've been able to cover in this webinar, as well as answer in the Q&A portion, has been helpful for you as you begin to navigate the virtual working space. I'll just say it one more time, we will be sharing out resources as well as some of the questions that we did not have the time to get to today. And now I'm going to turn it over to CanWaCH's CEO, Helen Scott, for a few final remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin, and to Charmaine, Nicole, Antu, and Caitlin for sharing some of our experiences. I hope that as all of you face some uncertainty in your work worlds, that we've been able to assure you that there is an opportunity to be productive and get things done even while working virtually. And just to give you a sense of real time, I had to turn my video off a few minutes ago because two of my sons started a soccer game right behind the screen here, so I had to chase them out of the room. So I think we're all experiencing similarities here. As Erin mentioned, we look forward to sharing the recording of this session as well as resources by email to you at the email address that you shared with us to register through Eventbrite. And as well, just to remind you, as Charmaine mentioned, this webinar is the first in a series of webinars that we're presenting as we collectively navigate the COVID-19 response. Next week, we're presenting the next webinar in our series. It's entitled Committed to Deliver Global Health Programming and Operations Amid the COVID-19 Response. This is going to be an opportunity for our members and partners to explore together and address the impacts on our business and operations. So please continue to watch your inboxes, the CanWaCH website, and our social media channels to learn the final date, the time, and how to register for that upcoming webinar. You can see our social media channels on the screen right now. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. Best wishes to you, your coworkers, and your families, and stay healthy. Thank you.